Hello and welcome to this tutorial. This is Uncle Sam from CoH2.org and I want to help you with your first steps in Worldbuilder. So, you have decided you want to create a multiplayer map for Company of Heroes 2 using Relic's tool Worldbuilder, but don't know where to start. So, we have to go to File, New Multiplayer Map. And the first thing that pops up is here a dialog box. And it asks you for a name of your map and a location where to save it. And this is actually very important because maps for Company of Heroes 2 have to be saved in a very specific location. This location is within your Steam folder, Steam Apps, Common, Company of Heroes 2, CoH2, Data, Scenarios, MP. Now, if you have many maps like I do, you may create even subfolders in there, but important is that your map files are within this folder, Scenarios MP. So we start by right-clicking and right-clicking somewhere to create a new folder. Call it, say, to example map, and in there I now save my example map. Hit open and a new pop-up comes up. So this is the very first point where you have to make a decision, because here you have to define the size of your map. And in order to illustrate this, I've created this image here. You've got the terrain size and the playable area, which you have to define in this dialog box over here. You see terrain size, playable area, but that's not the end. Because in Company of Heroes 2 there's also a soft edge within this playable area where you cannot give commands to units, but where they appear on the battlefield when you call them in. And this playable area has to be 64 meters bigger than, I call it, the core area, where you actually can give commands to your units. So by this, all the sizes are more or less defined. You have your playable area. The core area is 64 meters less, and the terrain size should be 256 meters bigger than your playable area. Because outside the playable area, you have an out-of-bounds area where you want to place some objects, so you have a soft edge, and when you move your camera to the edge of your playable area, you don't see just nothing, but you see something which embeds your map into some bigger world and somewhat trick your mind of being playing in a big world, so to say. So, with this rough idea of how the playable area and the terrain size connect to each other and what is the core area, I want to come to this table on the left. This is a rough starting point about how big a map should be for a specific game mode. Say you want to create a 1v1 map, then your core area should be roughly 256 meters times 256 meters. And using these formulas here, this means the playable area has to be 320 times 320 meters, and the terrain size, again, 256 meters more for each dimension. So this gives you a set of numbers, and for 2v2, 3v3 or even bigger maps, this somewhat scales up. But this is just a rough idea. You may play with numbers slightly, but especially if you want to go to non-square maps, say you want to make a rectangular map, you may play with the numbers, but the overall area should remain the same. So, say we decide to make a 1v1 map. That means we have to have a terrain size of 576 meters times 576 meters, and the playable area has to be 320 times 320 square meters. We go back to Worldbuilder and pick a terrain size of 576 times 576 meters. Pick a playable area of 320 times 320. Now notice the core area is not even mentioned in here, so we have to draw this ourselves, and it's not really fixed in size, but these 64 meters less for each dimension is a rough estimate that works quite well. So we've defined our size, hit OK, and Worldbuilder opens a new map. No objects on it, nothing. You just see here the whole map. The terrain actually. No indication of where the playable area is, but we can change this by going to Overlay and say Toggle Show Playable Area. This draws the red circle here, and this is actually why I have chosen to make a red stroke on this rectangular here. So you have the idea what you see here in Worldbuilder, but no indication of the core area. Now what I do usually is at this step I still mark this core area because I want to know where I have to place objects in the playable area, and I do this using the spline tool. So I take the spline tool and actually I add another overlay, the grid 32 meters, and this means by subtracting 32 meters on each side or on each edge, I'm actually with a size that I defined earlier, which is 64 meters less than the playable area. So the spline tool selected, I now pick a spline which is, well, can be anything, but I pick NMUI dotted line. See here. And now by right clicking on the map I can draw some lines, so to say, and by hitting enter I place the spline. Now this doesn't help me, but if I place it here along the edge of my core area to place at least 4 points, enter, and do the same for every edge, enter, enter, I have now an orientation of where my core area is, even when I disable the overlay. So I see marked by my splines here, I've got the core area, here is the soft edge of my playable area, and here is the terrain, or the out of bounds area of this terrain actually. So now I would like to save the map, but what you will notice is that if I click Save Map, there are some setup errors which I have to deal with first. So what you see is there are some minimum requirements which have to be fulfilled before I can actually save the map. And this is, I have to have at least one sector point of each type. This means a strategy point, a munitions point, a fuel point, and a victory point. And I have to have at least 2 player bases before I can save the map. So for this, we go to the Objects Placement tool here on the top left. We go to, on the right in the Objects list, to EBPS Gameplay, and we start with the sector types. I start with a fuel point. For a multiplayer map, this is Territory Fuel Point MP. Select this, and by right-clicking, I place it on the map. Here it is. Do the same for munitions point. This is Territory Munitions Point MP. Place it somewhere else. Then I need to place a Territory Point MP. That's a strategy sector. And I have to place a victory point. So these 4 are my sector types, the 4 sector types I have to place. Now what's left is the 2 bases. So I'm zooming into the edge here. A base is defined by a starting position shared territory. This object will create a territory for my base. Inside this territory I have to, or actually I'm wrong, the starting territory team creates the base, and this starting position shared territory defines the position of my headquarters inside this territory. So we've got territory, starting territory team, and inside there we have the starting position shared territory. And then on top of this we need a map entry point. Place it somewhere here. Doesn't matter right now. And now we have the same to do the same stuff for the second player base. We may place the things manually, or I can make just make a copy of the ones that I already placed, and this I can do by pressing down the C key on my keyboard, hovering over at least one object while having my C key pressed, and then left mouse click drag the objects away. So that creates a copy. I can now select them, hover over until it highlights one of them, move them to the other corner, and now I've got all my objects placed. But for the bases I actually have to assign a player, and I do this by selecting all these objects which are responsible for one base, and then on the player assignment here on the right I pick player 1. It's walled by default, and for the other one I pick player 2. So I've got assigned player base 1 here, player base 2 here. I've got 4 strategy sectors or 4 sector types all placed once on the map. Now I just have to define the sectors themselves. I go to territory tool, or to the territory tool right here, and you notice there is no territory defined yet. In the very beginning I have to define it by calculate Voronoi. This creates sectors below each of these objects, and I can edit these sectors later, but that's something for a later step. Right now we have done everything that's necessary to save the map. You can see this by going to save, and the map is saved without errors. This is the starting point for every new map, and we may go on from here, but this is something for another tutorial. So I hope everything was clear. You may ask questions in the tutorial thread, which is linked in the description of this video. And yeah, I'm happy to see some feedback, whether it helped you or not, or if you have difficulties. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful.